couple of things just to add a little bit of, just another little layer to it, and then we just briefly like to go through group Lectio. If that's, is there time? 11:45?
We don't have to be anywhere till 12:15.
Okay, that's cool. I try not to run out of 12:15. Just a little layer of complexity. Just in terms of the inevitable reactions of various kinds that most of us have to Scripture. I think a perspective on that is that this is the Word. God speaks to us through Scripture, just as she does through rocks and trees and birds and other people and late buses and all the other phenomena of life. In particularly this practice, because we're engaging with the Word, I think it's a useful practice to fairly deliberately try and open your heart to what you're reading. You're facing Christ in the Word. In the tradition, it's a fairly robust aspect of the tradition, you face Christ in the Word. So it's easy as modern folk to go into reading Scripture, particularly when if you're moving through a gospel or a part of the Bible, verse by verse, as you go through this over time. It's easy to hit a passage that you know you don't like, you know you disagree with this, you know it's giving advice that annoys you, that you've never agreed with, that you've actually spoken against in public. And to go into a passage with a hard heart and a stiff neck and know that you know what you know about this, and silly old Lectio is not going to change me. And sometimes even to skip over the passage because you know you don't like it. I encourage you not to do that, but to go into whatever discipline you've set yourself for how to work through this, and when it comes to Lectio time, to face whatever it is you're about to read with an open heart and a slightly bowed head because you're facing Christ in that moment. Your choice to do this practice with this Word, even if it's roomy, you're facing Christ in the Word. That's one thing. The second thing is that just an aspect of, there's some schemas for how one's perception of a text deepens. So it relates to what you were asking before, I think, that on the same time, in a single session when you're ruminating around a particular text, or in multiple sessions when you're going around the same text over hours, days, months, years, decades over the same text, there's a sense that the perception of the text can deepen, so that there's an initial layer of understanding the text at a fairly literal level, that it's a story talking about a particular thing that happened between a bunch of people, or it's got a superficial meaning that you grasp. And then understanding the text can deepen to some parts of the tradition call it a moral level, or an allegorical level, sorry, that the text can be a metaphor for other things. That it's talking about this superficially, but it also metaphorically means these other things. And there's a third level of deepening and understanding the text into the moral level, is what it's sometimes called. The way you can appropriate either the literal meaning or the allegorical meaning to relate to your own life. That it's got some bearing on your life just as it is. And then below that, there's a deeper meaning of what it might mean at a mythic, at a timeless, at an eternal level. And there's probably layers under that, but please, Joe.
I just want to make an observation in comparison to the centering prayer, because I had a lot of difficulty with the centering prayer because there was a whole emptiness, and I kept wanting to do something with it, and the only thing I allowed myself to do was say my word, and then it was like that, but that's not helping. But I noticed with this, and to use your food analogy, I really felt that, I had this ingredient, and I combined it in my head, and through the prayer, it created this flavor. And I think flavor is the best word I could really find. So I had no problem with the silent part because I had a flavor that I could enjoy with it, as opposed to the centering prayer, which it was like sucking on spittle.
Right.
Here was I pulled something out of this that was, a multi-layered, and it hit all my different taste buds of the soul and things like that. And it was something to focus on in the silence. So whenever other things were going on, I didn't need the word,
Right.
Because I had that flavor in my soul's mouth.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But as Bishop Will was saying, in terms of the alchemical process,
Yeah.
before, I think one of the lovely things about this practice is that when you've got a very active mind. And I'm confused why you're in this church if you don't. Because, I don't know, just from a random sample of folks in the church, there seem to be quite a few active minds in the communion, both laity and clergy. Contemplation is the goal, but it's easier to get to contemplation when you've given your mind its say, you've given your heart its say, you've given your affect its say, you've given your memory its say, and they all get a chance to kind of have a little bit of a lie down, like a weaned child on the mother's breast, and then the silence emerges naturally. And you can move, rather than putting centering prayer opposed to Lectio Divina, you can do a cycle of Lectio as an intro to centering prayer, to drop into the sort of natural silence that emerges out of Lectio, and then after a few minutes to kind of go, okay, and now I'm going to do 10, 20 minutes of
I actually found that for the fourth stage, what I ended up doing was actually very close to just doing centering prayer.
Right.
Drawing a word from the passage and using that as my centering word.
Nice. Yeah, that's beautiful.
It is like undoing your belt after a good meal. That 5 minutes sort of where you don't think or do anything, you just
digest.
Yeah.
That's lovely. That's true. That's true. That's so true.
Lovely.
It is lovely. I'm very
picture.
familiar with that. I'm very familiar with that physical sensation. It's a very pleasant
Yeah,
sensation.
didn't we do that last night?
Yeah. So it's a lovely practice, and it gets lovelier with practice. So I commend it to you, I guess. Let me just briefly dip into group Lectio, and I'm doing this partly because I'm going to run through the contemplative Eucharist. So for clergy that are in the practice of doing the contemplative Eucharist, I just like to go through the steps of group Lectio. But for other folks, this is a great thing to do with an narthex. So let's just step through. It's the same. It's exactly the same process, and in fact, you can go through those 4 steps of Lectio with the group that you're going to do it with to kind of prime them for how they can embrace this if they choose to. Or you can just do it in a really simple way where you just say, we're going to read and then we're going to allow that to deepen into silence and see what happens, and let people respond organically to the experience. The group Lectio, there's different ways of doing it. This is Cynthia's recipe, and I'm quite fond of it. You begin with a little silence. So you give people a bit of a space to kind of calm down, get out of catching up from whatever they were doing before, whatever chatter or puns or jokes that we were sharing earlier in the afternoon. Give a little bit of silence and ring the bell to kind of formally say, we're starting now. And then to begin, you choose, there's a 0 step, which is choose someone to do the reading. The person who does the reading, the person who rings the bell can be the same person. You can have a group leader who rings the bell and keeps time, and a reader who does the reading. You can split it up if you like, it doesn't really matter. Begin with silence, ring the bell, read the text. And I guess I've been trying to model, when I've been reading passages through the Cynthia lecture and the psalm I read earlier, a mode in which to read. So try to read it slowly, try to treasure the words. I guess one thing I've maybe modelled that might be not so sensible is try not to put too much of your own opinion into the way you read. So I've been reading you passages that I have fairly strong responses to, and there's a lot of how I feel about it that comes through in the way I read it. But if you're a group reader, if you're a lector for a Lectio, then it's probably more appropriate to just go fairly slowly, treasure each word, allow the passage to unfold, but don't allow too much of what you think to colour how you're reading. Which is part of the reason why you do it twice. So you read it once, and the instruction to people is the same as what we've been saying up until now. You read it through once as you read it through people, to listen for a word or a phrase that their heart-mind is drawn to. You read it through slowly again a second time, and if you've brought too much of yourself to the first reading, then the second time through, just settle it down, flatten it out a little, and allow the text to speak more or less for itself. And then allow a pause after the second reading, and then give people space and encourage everybody in the room, not anybody that just feels like it, but everybody in the room, to speak aloud the word or phrase that they were drawn to. And someone will have already said your word, and that's fine. It's okay for your word to get repeated. That's all right. We're going to try this in a minute.
One by one?
Sorry?
You go through that one by one then? Or everybody says their word at the same time?
It's kind of organic, the way I've usually seen it work. Someone just has to get their word out first, and then someone feels like they should go second, and sometimes two people say the thing at the same time, and that's all fine. It's okay. Because you're usually sitting in a circle for this. So the normal stereophony kind of handles the apparent cacophony. Somebody write that down, that was good. Once everyone's had a chance to speak their word or phrase, you read the text a third time, and then you allow the group to sit in silence. Now, rather than explaining why this works, we're just going to do it. So can I get everyone to grab a chair and let's move into a circle.
How tight a circle would you like?
Enough to fit the people. Leave the camera on if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because that's an interesting thing. Someone hand me a bun? Very much. So I think we'll choose Tim for
Two-dimensional Euclid.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
That's good.
He'll ring the bell too.
I probably will.
Exercise? Spare chat.
Just a little silence. Everything on the ground. Encumbereth yourself not. Encumbereth a word. There. Therefore I prayed, and understanding was given me. I called on God, and the spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her to scepters and thrones. I accounted wealth as nothing in comparison with her. Neither did I liken her to any priceless gem, because all gold is but a little sand in her sight, and silver will be accounted as clay before her. Therefore I prayed, and understanding was given me. I called on God, and the spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her to scepters and thrones, and I accounted wealth as nothing in comparison with her. Neither did I liken to her any priceless gem, because all gold is but a little sand in her sight, and silver will be accounted as clay before her. Wealth is nothing.
Understanding was given to me.
Her. I called. I prayed.
I called.
Understanding was given.
Understanding. Understanding.
Sight. Always put a little sand in your sight.
Therefore I prayed, and understanding was given me. I called on God, and the spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her to scepters and thrones, and I accounted wealth as nothing in comparison with her. Neither did I liken her to any precious gems, because all gold is but a little sand in her sight, and silver will be accounted as clay before her. just a brief one on the basis that you should always finish Lectio, hoping you can do more later. Hopefully you can see how that works as a group, as a kind of correlate to how it works individually. And one of the things, the sharing the word or phrase, well, what was your sense of how that worked? Jeremy?
Not to get all covenant on us, but I kind of felt like there was a cauldron in the center, and we all kind of added something to it, and therefore there were things I didn't consider. So when other people said something, it's like, oh, I didn't. Yeah. And then so it really changed. Where before when I did it alone, I had my flavor, I had my thing, but then it was like, this is more of a group feel, and I could actually feel the energy that was being put into the center from this person. And it's kind of telling as to what people chose, you know, like this person focused on this and this person focused on that, and you kind of feel their needs and what they're trying to pull out of that cauldron in the center.
Their needs in that moment, at least.
Yeah.
It might not be the same as their needs in context.
No. But like in the needs they got from that reading, like what they needed in that.
I remember the first time I did it on retreat. I can't remember what the reading was, but I was absolutely certain everyone was just going to say the same word. You know, it was like 2 sentences long. It was clearly there was one word. It was the hinge word in the whole thing. Surely everyone's going to say that word. Someone seriously said, and.
Now, can you have like 3 different people do the readings?
Yeah.
To break it up?
Sure.
And if you do that, can you actually use like 3, same passage, but out of 3 different versions? For 3 different perspectives of the same?
I'd hesitate to let it get too complex.
Okay.
I mean, you could really sure you could do it in Greek and Syriac if you wanted, but can I just quickly get anyone else's impression of how the speaking the word thing worked?
My sense was very, very close to what Joey said. There were these little eruptions that were happening where each time somebody would say something, and I would, in a sense, get the whole passage again through the lens of that word.
Yeah.
So you say, understanding, okay, that's what that's about. Oh, wisdom was given to me. That's what that's about. Sight. That's what that's about. And it was almost like getting the passage over and over again each time.
Lovely.
It is kind of, I guess it's interesting to speak it out loud too, because in our private version we're reading the verse out loud, but I didn't say the word out loud then, and it's just spoken word being very different than
Spoken word
and silent word.
You kind of have to commit as well.
Yeah.
What's my bit? What's the thing I feel most strongly about? It's this. That's what I'm going to say out loud.
It's really cool too, like hearing getting to be in that moment of like hearing everybody's shared feeling, emotional feelings of it all, and that spontaneous eruption. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Anybody else?
It's like we all contributed to each other.
Yeah. But I find something that comes up for me is it builds a kind of sort of faith in the collective wisdom of the group. That you have to commit to the bit you most want to. You feel most needs to get said. And what you get from that sharing is, well, it all got said. All the things that I was even mildly drawn to got said amongst this group of people by the time we were finished. We're good. I think we got there. It's good. It's good.
It's very magical.
Yeah,
Or
it
what
is. It is.
one thing you think is a bit to you, only a part of that is picked up by another person,
Right.
or a slightly longer, and we think that's one little thing, wisdom was given, but we had variations or of it.
Yeah, people will get individual words out of your phrase, or people will build a phrase around your
Yeah.
word. Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
pick the verb. All these things happen.
Would you recommend them having it in front of them?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
I didn't think so, but
Give it to them afterwards if you like, or tell people.
it requires them to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an ancient practice, so it's a speaking out loud and a listening practice. It's not a reading. And despite the fact that it's called Lectio Divina, it's not. In fact, when you're doing it on your own, have the text in front of you when you go to read it out loud. But when you get to meditatio, seriously consider popping a bookmark in and putting it to one side. And don't sit there going over the text. You can do that for a little bit of it if you like, but close the book at some point during meditatio and allow yourself to ruminate on it in an inward way. Can you see a little how doing that as a group helps to kind of decenter the primacy of your interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Kind of opens your heart to the possibility that maybe the way you've always read that text. I mean, every episode of Lectio does that a little, right? You kind of go, oh, I get a new thing from it. And sometimes in a group setting, okay, that word had never hit me before, and suddenly I'm seeing it from a different perspective. And so there's that sense that the centrality of your ego in this becomes less centered. Slowly over time, you get more of it as sort of, okay, it's not just me.
Yeah.
It's not just about me.
I hate to throw water on the fire here.
Yeah, sure.
You lack the context of what the other people are thinking in terms of the specific word.
Of course.
So in
Yeah.
other words, you have no idea why they're bringing it up,
Of
which
course.
I think in certain respects is a loss to the process as well. But then again, it's not exactly feasible.
Yeah, how do
Why
you
did you choose that word?
It's not
Why'd
group
you choose that
therapy.
word? Why'd you choose that word?
There's
But you
always-
could talk about it afterwards.
But
You
it's
talk
still,
about it.
it still limits to individual perception, okay?
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
they can focus on another word, which may suddenly become, present in my mind, but by the same token, the significance of it is totally different
Yes,
to
that's
me
true.
versus the
I
rest
don't
of
know that it's totally different. I mean, I think there is something about being in this community that when, if somebody in this group says wisdom was given to me, I know kind of where they're going with that. At least I think I do.
Actually,
Now,
in
I
reference
could be
to that-
totally wrong,
In
but
reference to that specific phrase, the only thing I thought, what wisdom? How was it given to you? When? As a result of what? That's what went through my mind in
Yeah.
response to that statement.
Yeah.
The
It was-
purpose of the practice isn't to weave us together into a community that all thinks the same thing.
right.
The purpose of the practice is to give each of us the benefit of getting decentered. So there's a real limit to how much you can know. I mean,
Yeah,
in terms of what their needs are, in terms of what their interpretations are. There's we all, if a person's voice has a distinctive tone and you've got your eyes closed and a particular voice has a certain word, all sorts of assumptions arise as to why that particular person chose that particular word. Okay, great. Hold on to that assumption, because later that's a really useful thing to bring some welcoming practice to, or to drop into contemplation and allow it to kind of unwind itself and look at that lovely play of assumptions you've just made about that other human being. Because that's all fun as well, right?
I noticed that it's still here. Like, it's not like we started talking and then, the cauldron leaked and
Right.
now it's still
Stirring.
bubbling and
Right.
stirring,
Yeah.
and even currently it's like we're talking about it and I'm learning a little bit more, we're talking about it, so it's still present.
Right.
What passage was that? Where was it from?
No one can hand me a Bible with the Apocrypha without me jumping straight to the Wisdom of Solomon.
That's where I got mine from too.
And I probably would have been good if I'd written down the passage that I was reading from.
Bookmark the
But I
page.
didn't.
Was it 8 or 9?
Yeah, that's somewhere in there. It's Wisdom 7, verse 7. So easy to remember. One of the things for me that both individual and group practice with Lectio has given me is a really clear sense of the word as a thing, which becomes present to you, but not as when you read the word on the page, you have a sense of it as a linear sequence of words and sentences that paint out a particular story, and it's got this really sort of stifling linearity to it. But what comes out of this practice for me is that it stands up off the page. It becomes 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 dimensional. It's not mere. A hypertext is kind of limited even to describe what the word is. It's a multi-dimensional space which we inhabit during this practice and explore and hopefully explore together. So.
One thing that to kind of go to what Lance was saying, personally for me, I kind of like the fact that I somewhat got what the person was coming from, and yet I had my own interpretation, my own lens, my own slant, because then I could take that as this beautiful sort of alchemical process where I kind of got what the person was saying, but then my mind took what I thought they were going with and then ran with it, and it opened up a whole new doorway of meaning and everything else that I would be limited by if I knew exactly what it was that person was going with by choosing that phrase or that word. So
Chapter 7, verse 7.
Chapter 7, verse 7, I think.
And continue.
If you've got a group of people and you're interested in knowing what each other's actual interpretations actually are, feel free to later in the week have a discussion group. Because the discussion group model is perfectly well for that.
I think it'd be interesting too to record what people's words are and kind of create something new, like a new kind of, like afterwards, look back and listen, and because there seemed to be a certain poetry to it. Like I said I called, and then right after that, I think it was you said I prayed, and then it was like it kind of, it was kind of like this new passage that was being formed.
You know, like
same
that
energy,
website.
but just different. You know.
That website, I think it's called Wordle,
Uh-huh.
where you can type in all the words and then you can see it kind of graphically.
Kind of
That would be
textual exegesis. One of the things I kind of forgot to kind of really hammer hard is that at the end of Lectio finishes in silence, and you leave in silence. So you don't sit around, you don't finish the period of contemplation together and then go, ding, okay, so what did everyone get out of that?
Yeah.
Okay, not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to share in word and silence together, and you get up and go. Ideally home, or off for a walk or something, and maybe after some time later, if you want to get together for a cup of tea, that's fine. But you shouldn't go into a discussion of what just happened in Lectio, because the purpose of it is to allow the word to deepen into silence.
I could see doing this as a discussion beforehand. Maybe start out, look at the text, discuss the text, wrangle over it and all this stuff, and then move into this as the final part of your
Don't you
discussion.
think that would
It's almost doing
skew
the-
text though?
Yeah, of course.
Because
Of course it would.
You know, it's
Skew or enrich.
well, I guess then what strikes me, the whole purpose of the exercise is spontaneous response, and I would think that spontaneous response would be lessened by detailed discussion beforehand.
I don't know that spontaneous response is necessarily the point, though. It's more of a deepening. It's you interact with it on more than one level.
Sometimes spontaneous and intuitive response is exactly the same thing.
That's true. Well,
That
these are two different approaches to doing
Yeah,
it, which
that's
is fine.
just my observation.
Which is fun.
I think it'd be good to like maybe leave but then come back. You know, like everybody just kind of disperse, take the energy somewhere, disperse it, and then come back and then discuss it maybe. Because I think there's something to that. I think there is a little bit of I don't want to say group mind because that's not the point. You know what I mean? But there is a little bit of connecting,
Right.
with other people and feeling. I mean, because Scripture is so multidimensional.
Absolutely.
It resonates different vibrations with everybody, and sometimes you can get stuck with that one way, and it would be nice to kind of basically have somebody slap your perspective and spin your head around a little bit, And
I also like that from an alchemical point of view. You start out with this chaos of you have this reading and you don't know anything about it, and you do this, and then you all part, and then you all come back together and maybe do the discussion afterwards.
Right.
or I think it would be nice maybe to do before Mass.
Well, in a few hours you'll get to do it in the middle of Mass. We'll see how that goes.
Could I add one?
I'd encourage you to at least try this the classic model of ending in silence and then parting, and just to kind of see how that settles, because it does surprising things, and a group that does this repetitively over a period of time develops a deep though undiscussed relationship, which is a magic all the time.
Yeah.
I know David asked a question. I just wanted to speak to it from some personal experience.
Yeah, please.
With different readers, I've used a method like that where we had 2 or 3 people doing the reading, and the method recommended that you try to have people that are quite different in terms of gender, age, or voice, and that really helps add to it. But in terms of using a different reading through the same set of Lectio, I've never really seen that recommended or done.
I'd encourage you to try it.
It was just kind of an interesting concept that popped in my head.
Yeah, but I'd also adding too many layers of complexity on can also make it.
But
No,
try
yes.
I would say get used to the practice as it is first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many
Yeah.
times,
Exactly.
and then, before.
Right.
That's a good piece of advice.
And
And
then
if you move to try it at some point a few times and kind of and you feel like letting everyone know how it went, I'd love to hear.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Learn physical science before trying to build an atomic bomb. Yeah, like so.
like I said, it's just one of those little wild thoughts that went racing into my head. So I'll ask.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Okay, so quickly, there's a few people who haven't spoken very much. Is there anybody that wants to throw anything in about their own experience or something they observed in the practice? Em? Carrie? You're all good? Anthony?
Recently it was hard for me to silence my attention deficit. I started thinking about balloons and bananas and puppies and things like that. The silence part, I couldn't help it.
Well, that's why for me,
Thoughts arise.
the centering prayer technique is really useful because that's what I do. I mean, monkey mind goes nuts, and the centering prayer actually brings me back to the silence, but it's a silence that's born of this reading.
Yeah.
So.
The thing I found really different about this with regard, sort of in relation to the kind of reading that I'm used to doing, which is philosophical reading, and at least in the way that I am probably a bunch of people have been trained, is that you have this responsibility to come up with a relatively objective, comprehensive interpretation of the text. And I found it kind of liberating not to have to do that with this, where the job is not to,
give an account.
yes, or to find the one word that can be the adequate lens for the whole passage, but to find the one word that resonates and to allow yourself to be sort of partial in that way and trust that, as you said, you trust the wisdom of the group. Anything that's important, or most of the stuff that's important, will be picked up by other people.
Yeah.
And I found that really helpful and liberating.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
You good?
For lunch?
Yeah, we're about 5 minutes off.
I'm
Right.
hungry,
Cauldron's full.
My passage was about food. That didn't help.
Well, and then you're talking about cauldrons and bubbles.
Let's honor the cauldron briefly and then go to lunch. Let's honor the cauldron by going to lunch.
shit.
My comment would be you
Thanks,
ring the
folks.
bell. You ring the bell. Thank you.